Hi, welcome back to Scherable. I'm your host, Bill Scher. Tuesday afternoon, a basement edition of Scherable. And we are 2 weeks before Election Day, and I can sense the poll-based anxiety many of you are having. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we can glean from polls between now to Election Day, particularly keeping in mind what happened in 2016. The often the narrative is that the polls got it wrong in 2016, so you should ignore them and just work your heart out and so on and so forth. And of course, you should work your heart out. No one's suggesting you should be complacent no matter what the polls say. Even if you are for Biden and it looks very good for Biden, you should run up the score, not stay at home. You should try to make it a big margin, a big win, take back as many Senate seats as you can, etc. But what I think the simplified narrative of 2016 misses is that you could see in the polling in the last 2 weeks that Trump was moving up. It's just that at the time, and look, I was not right in 2016. I was not prescient. I missed the data that was staring me in the face. But we are so often told that there is a natural tightening. So Hillary Clinton was ahead pretty much all the way in 2016. And so when it tightened at the end, you could dismiss it. Oh, well, that's natural tightening. You shouldn't look at that and think that the whole race is going to turn on its head and flip over, because it's been relatively stable up until that point. And what we can now see better in hindsight is that it wasn't that stable. Hillary had her dips. She dipped several times over the course of the year. She wasn't getting near 50%. She was in the mid-40s. With Gary Johnson and Jill Stein eating up some of the vote. And so there was a detectable softness that many of us should have been more sensitive to. The infamous Comey letter happened 11 days before Election Day. So at this point in the race in 2016, it hadn't even happened yet. But you already saw some narrowing in the national polls a few days before the Comey letter. She had peaked at around about 7 point lead in the Reader Politics average on the heels of the Access Hollywood tape. But that was already starting to fade, and maybe without the Comey letter, it wouldn't have kept dropping. We can't know. But the point is, there was some inherent softness in the Clinton candidacy that was already detectable, and that made her vulnerable to something like the Comey letter. And then after the Comey letter, you could look at some of the state polling and see some pretty significant narrowing. You could see it in Michigan, you could see it in Ohio, you could see it in Florida, you could see it in Pennsylvania, and you could see it in North Carolina. And in some of those states, particularly, if I remember correctly, Ohio and North Carolina and Florida, by Election Day, Trump had a small lead. The narrowing in Michigan was actually quite dramatic when you look at the graph. It was double digits to around 3 points. So some people say, well, Hillary was leading in Michigan. Well, yeah, but there was a big Trump upswing in those last 2 weeks that you could see. You could see in the data. The one state where you don't see it is Wisconsin. Wisconsin looked more stable than it actually was. And the one thing that I believe is relevant to understanding where we had the biggest poll misfires, particularly Michigan and Wisconsin, is those were two states where there was a big Democratic drop-off. The number of raw votes that Clinton had was more than 10% less than what Barack Obama had 4 4 years prior. And remember, there's population growth. So just by doing nothing, you should get a little bit more in your raw number. She fell backwards in those states. Whereas Florida, Hillary did a little bit better than Barack Obama in the raw vote. But Trump did much better than Mitt Romney. And Florida's polling proved more accurate than Michigan and Wisconsin. So you look at the national picture now, Biden is at 9, 10, 11 points margin nationally, depending on what average you're looking at. And that's been pretty stable over the course of the year. He's never gone below 4. The state polling also has been quite stable, with a couple of small exceptions. And if you recall, in 2012, Nate Silver's big insight in 2012 was, even though the national number seems tight, the state polling looks very stable, and that's why he had fairly high confidence that Barack Obama was going to win, although he didn't say it was a guarantee. So we see that stability. We see Biden over 6 points in Wisconsin and Michigan, as well as Nebraska too. And if I'm still looking at the 538 poll average, also for Pennsylvania. Now, we just saw a dip in Pennsylvania in the Real Clear Politics average. A couple of Republican-leaning pollsters, particularly I think Trafalgar, I think Insider Advantage, they had some recent data that's dragged down the Real Clear Politics number in Pennsylvania. 538 adjusts for those sorts of what they call house effects. And so you're not seeing that impact the 538 number as much. So if that seems a little fluky on the RCP side, I'm not prepared to say Pennsylvania is tightening based on that. I mean, we have 2 more weeks to go here. So if there's time for that little quirk to be ironed out, if it is just a fluke of those a couple of recent polls. If you're seeing it in other non-R leaning polls, we'll see it. So Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska too, if Biden is ahead in 6 points or more on those things, it is very rare to see that kind of dramatic tightening 2 weeks out. That gets you to over 270 electoral votes. So we see tighter races in Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, still with Biden leans, and Arizona has been a little narrower, but still stable around 3 or 4 points. And Pennsylvania, I think, has been a tricky state to poll, so people are more reluctant to grab on any one poll there or even any average there. So on the whole, the race still looks stable. And if there is tightening to occur, which is possible, it could just be some shaky Trump voters coming home. And if Biden is still around 50% nationally in key states, I wouldn't think too much of it. But if the Biden number is coming down while the Trump number is coming up, then you might, then your anxiety level might start to rise more legitimately. But my overall point is, you could see that tightening in 2016 if you were looking for it. I mean, I think a lot of us might have saw it and dismissed it by thinking, okay, it's natural tightening, but come on. How many undecided people are really going to walk into that polling booth faced with a choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and say, I got to go with Donald? I think a lot of us presumed some natural rationality was going to kick in and prevent those numbers from going all the way over. And of course, that was not the case. Today, it doesn't seem like Biden has the same level of vulnerability. I see in a live chat here, someone mentioning that it's insane this Hunter Biden story seems to be building traction. Now that the Hunter Biden story has been around for 6 days. And we haven't seen it have a big impact yet. Not saying that it can't, not saying things couldn't build from here, but it seems like Biden is a little more inoculated from that kind of late hit. There's a better bond he's built with the public, or a greater antipathy the public has with Trump right now. And so something like that seems a little sketchy, a little fuzzy. That's not having the same impact as that we can detect. With Hillary, it seemed like she had some inherent vulnerabilities. I don't think the entire race is Hillary's fault. I think there's some backlash happening from the Obama administration, quite frankly. But I do think she had some vulnerabilities. The Comey letter just went right at him. So I want to see a bit more evidence that Biden has any similar kind of vulnerability before freaking out over one October surprise. Question in the live chat: why is Pennsylvania trickier to pull? Florida has proven trickier to pull. I don't think Pennsylvania is necessarily. Florida, we've seen some big misses very recently. A lot of the polling in 2018 was quite good, but the Florida governor's race was the late polling suggested the Democrat was going to win, and that proved not to be the case. And Florida, I thought the 2016 polling was actually quite good, certainly relative to Michigan and Wisconsin. One thing that's a big wild card in general that we didn't have in 2016 is the mail vote and the early in-person vote. Because of the pandemic, there's a greater push for mail voting. It's likely going to increase overall turnout. By some estimates, 15 million more. And once you're bringing in a whole new batch of voters, that can be tricky for pollsters to determine who is a likely voter or not. And there's also other quirks with that. There's a greater human error with mail voting. State rules are different. If you're in a state where you have to put it in the second envelope, if you got to have a witness signature, those sorts of things. Signatures don't match from other signatures you gave. Those things are X factors. I do think in general, I would not expect such a large influx of voters to greatly tilt one way or the other. If Biden is up 9-10 points nationally, I wouldn't think a huge influx of mail vote would skew heavily towards Trump. There's a national wind that seems to be occurring that, obviously national vote can go in a different direction than individual states, but we are seeing that 9-10 point margin pull redder states to be more pink, if not purple. Whether it's a Georgia or a Texas or even a really deep red state like a West Virginia, we're seeing those margins narrow relative to 2016. And so my guess would be that would be reflected in the new mail voting too, but it is a bit of a wild card, and why those kinds of wild cards can be hard for pollsters to interpret. So I think I answered Robert's question right there. Would this mean the likely voter models are wrong? I think there is an art here that is tough for the pollsters. Who is a likely voter in this case when you have this big influx of additional vote? I'll leave it on that note for now. For this edition of Scherable. Hope to talk to you later in this week. We got a debate on Thursday, in theory. Maybe we'll do a live stream for that. I'll talk to you all soon. Remember to subscribe on YouTube, and if you want to contribute financially, patreon.com/BillScher. Thanks, everybody.